There's going to be more people joining us in the next couple of minutes. My name is Dan Feltis. I serve as a board member and trustee for the New Hampshire Institute for Civics Education, pinch hitting for Martha Madsen, our amazing executive director, who couldn't be here tonight, but wanted to welcome you all to be here. We have a wonderful panel tonight. We have an amazing moderator and Anna Brown from the Nonpartisan Citizens Count. And just by way of background, the New Hampshire Institute for Civics Education was established to develop, nurture, and maintain an informed, engaged, and civil New Hampshire citizenry. And that involves a number of different things that the New Hampshire Institute for Civics Education has been involved in, including a number of workshops, educational seminars, work on civics education in and of itself. And our organization is a nonpartisan, bipartisan organization. And again, putting on wonderful panels like the panel here tonight. We're so grateful for all the people who are here tonight, the young leaders that we have on this Zoom. I'm really looking forward to the conversation. I know how difficult it is to be involved as a young person, as former youngest state senator in history, youngest majority leader of the state senate in history. And I know that it can be difficult. And I'm so grateful for the leadership of Jonathan, Jack, Cassandra, and Ronell, and everything that they are doing to advance the discussion on the important issues here in New Hampshire. And that's what it's all about. And so thank you for all that you do. I look forward to the conversation. And for folks who are listening, something that I say and we've talked about in New Hampshire Institute for Civics Education, just that quote from Justice Brandeis, that the most important office in a democracy is that of private citizen. That of private citizen, not state senator, not whatever it might be, private citizen. And that's what we strive to do at the New Hampshire Institute for Civics Education, is activate and inform our citizenry, get them active and involved. And so again, looking forward to this conversation. We have Anna Brown from Citizens Count, which is a nonpartisan organization that provides valuable information on so many of the things that are going on, including at the State House. And thank you so much, Anna, for agreeing to moderate and be here tonight. I'll turn it over to Anna Brown. Thank you again.
Thanks, Dan. Welcome, everyone. I'll just do another quick introduction of our awesome roundtable panelists tonight. So for starters, we have Ronell Cella. Ronell's co-founder of Black Lives Matter Manchester and is currently a senior studying political science at UNH. So she was an activist in high school, and most recently, you may have seen her name because she was a public member of the governor's state level commission on law enforcement, accountability, community, and transparency, which LEACT is what we've often heard of. She was recently awarded Young Progressive of the Year by the New Hampshire Young Democrats. Jack Hansen is a first-year political science major at American University down in Washington, D.C. During high school, he participated in Model United Nations, We the People, and he was accepted to attend the American Legion Boys States program. And that's really where he found his interest in New Hampshire government and federal government. So he's done volunteer work with multiple campaigns. And just in this last election cycle, he was a campaign coordinator for a candidate for state senate, Jason Siverson. Next up, we have Cassandra Levesque. So she is a current state representative. You may have also seen her in the news in that capacity. She is most well known, and I first became familiar with her in terms of her advocacy work related to the issue of child marriage. She's a member of a family who are survivors of child marriage, and she's been advocating to end child marriage in New Hampshire. She started that campaign before she was ever a state representative, back when she was in high school, and she first learned about human trafficking and child marriage and her work as a Girl Scout. Lastly, we have Jonathan Weinberg. He recently attended Whitman College, where he studied philosophy, but he's from New Hampshire, 2018 Concord High School graduate. In high school, he led a walkout in solidarity with the students of Marjorie Stoneham Douglas. He testified in the state legislature. He's organized other statewide rallies. And now he's back in our state and he's on the Concord School Board. So I'm really excited to start this conversation with all of you. So let's dive right in. So the first question that I kind of want to start with is where your civic involvement came from. What inspired you? Who maybe comes to mind? Because I feel that many of the people on this call and all of us want to increase civic engagement in the future, and we need to start with young people. So I'm going to start out and I'm going to throw it out to Ronell first, if I may.
So ironically, it actually started in my civics class in high school. That's where I realized that I had a passion for politics and racial justice and things like that. I was dealing with racism in the school district, in my neighborhood, and just here in New Hampshire in general. And I wanted a way for people to hear my voice. And so I kind of decided that I was done just being angry and crying about all the things that were happening and that were being said to me. So I decided to make my voice heard. And that's when I co-founded Black Lives Matter Manchester.
All right, I'm gonna throw the same question out to Jack next. So how did your civic involvement, again, what was the beginning of that story?
So for me, the 2016 presidential election was really when I first started paying attention. I was really enthralled by everything, starting with the New Hampshire primary. And I'd had a history of politics in my family. My father served in the New Hampshire House of Representatives for 3 terms. So he introduced me to politics, but really that election started to formulate my views and my involvement. And I realized that it's something that I was not only interested in, but was really good at, and something that I could see myself doing in the future. And so I started to try to get involved in as many ways as possible, which led me to volunteer work as campaigns, because in 2016, I was only 15. So there wasn't much I could do at the time. But over the course of the last 5 years, through the high school and through the school system, I've been able to build a lot of knowledge, and it's been really great. And that's how I was able to choose my major in college, and it's all uphill from here.
Representative Lueck?
Yeah, so I got involved through Girl Scouts. I was looking at my Girl Scout Gold Award project at the time, and my troop went down to an older girl conference down in Rhode Island, and they talked about many different things, from human trafficking to college and all sorts of issues. And UNICEF came and talked to us, and they talked about human trafficking and the different types. And at first I wanted to tackle human trafficking, but my leader / mom was just like, that's a little bit too dangerous right now, especially with all the different aspects of it. And so I remember them talking about child marriage as one of the forms, and I talked to them, and they were just like, it's happening not only in countries that are still starting up, but also countries like the US, like the UK, and it needs to be stopped all over globally. And so I started researching, and then that's where I found the law here in New Hampshire, that it was 13 for girls and 14 for boys. And I thought that was just appalling. And so I wanted to make a change.
Very inspiring. All right, so Jonathan, gonna throw the same thing out to you. Where did that sort of civic engagement start for you?
I think I've been tangentially in kind of the political realm for a while. Growing up in Concord, when you have a state senator like Senate Majority Leader Dan Feltis, it's pretty easy to feel like you can get engaged. But my friends would like invite me to various phone banks, which were horrible. Still hate phone banking to this day. But I remember then in school, I had this debate on the Northern Pass, and I was horrible at debating. I still am horrible at debating, but it kind of introduced me to the possibility and like what is out there, and environmentalism and why it's so important. Fell in love.
So I think what's really interesting about some of the answers you guys just gave is for some of you it was personal, for some of you it was experiences in your family. Cassandra, you kind of were looking at this big national issue, and then Jonathan, it came very much at the sort of state and local level. So that's intriguing to me. I kind of wondered if maybe we're all going to say, oh, it started in school, or I had an inspiring teacher, but it really was, each of you had individual routes that you took to get to that place. And so kind of related to that, I want to ask though, what, as a young person, all of you started talking about getting involved before you ever reached voting age. And so I'm curious, do you think Is that uncommon? Do you think that most people, young people, see those opportunities to get involved? Or were you guys specifically motivated to do that because you had some unique experience that made it different for you? And I guess I will start. I'm going to shoot it to Jack first this time.
Yeah, from what I've seen, it's uncommon among like kids that I know who are of my age. For me, it stemmed from an understanding of the topics and just an overall general interest. And I think that when kids don't really have that interest or the exposure to politics in schools or in their personal lives, it's hard to feel that drive to get involved.
All right, I'll hop over to Cassandra then.
Yeah, so for me and my generation, we were just, especially after the 2016 elections, we were so angry that we couldn't do anything. We wanted to make that change and have a voice, and I've seen it so many times in youth where we can get so angry, we don't know how to make that change. And I think that we are definitely making that step towards that change. I'm really excited. And I remember being in the library at my high school, and we're all just talking to each other about the 2016 election, what went on, and it was the presidency. And then I never thought I would get involved in politics. I thought that was the end of the conversation, and then it wasn't for me. I still continued that conversation, and seeing so many youth getting involved, whether that's going to rallies, I think that it's really, really great. And I know that a lot of youth are stepping up, and so getting their voices heard. And so I'm really, really excited. So.
Awesome. So Renelle, kind of keeping with that same thing, did you feel like you were sort of unique among your peers? Or did you see those clear routes for other people getting interested in getting involved beyond voting when they weren't yet old enough to vote?
I think a lot of people my age are really passionate about the issues. I feel like if you pick any hot button issue, then there are a group of students or a group of activists like my age that are super passionate about it and want to be activists. I think the problem is young people don't really understand the impact that they can have on the system if they speak out. And so that's one of the things that I know Jonathan always talks about, is how it's really important that young people see people like us in positions of power, because if they see that, then they can believe that it is accessible to them as well. So I might have just stolen what he was going to say.
Yeah, I'll throw it right over to Jonathan. Absolutely.
Well, yeah, I think, if to be honest, I was like the least politically involved, more so. Like I was saying, people dragged me to phone banks. It wasn't really until 2018 that I feel like I got really just looped into it. One of the things I always say is when people are like really want something to be done, and then they're like, you do it, but I don't really want to do it. It's like, oh, let's try and change this, but do you want to be the one to do it? So in order to like combat that, I kind of just became the person that was like, well, you know what, I'll do it. You want to organize a rally? Okay, we'll see how that goes. But overall, I think similar to what Renelle has said, I think there are a lot of people who are passionate, and it just depends like what the issue is, and people will turn up.
So sort of, I guess, related to that question then, you guys are sort of finding your own leaders and finding your own voices, but did you have any mentors who encouraged you, whether it was a teacher or a parent or a local official in the community or other community leader? I'd be curious to know about that. And this time I'm going to start with Cassandra.
Yeah, definitely. I had, of course, with my Gold Award, I had to have an advisor. And so she was actually in politics a little bit. So, and she reached out to her local state rep, I got in contact with, Representative Ellen Reed. And of course, I reached out to my local state rep and former Senator Jackie Silly, and so many other female state reps who listened to me and heard me. And my local town party They reached out to me, the chair reached out to me, and she was so helpful throughout my campaign. And so I had a lot of mentors and people who just surrounded me with so much help and with open arms to help me through the political process.
That's great. That's so encouraging to hear. I'm going to jump to Jack. Same question. So, sort of, were there mentors in that process, or was it really kind of youth led?
For me, the biggest mentor that I had was my high school civics teacher, Dave Alcox at Milford High School. He is somebody who is very involved in politics and the state and education in the state of New Hampshire. And he was the person who convinced me really that politics doesn't necessarily just have to be a hobby for me or something that I find interesting. It can be a college major, it can be a career, it can be a way that I get involved through volunteer work and get out into the community and meet people. And he was the first person really who gave me access to opportunities, which allowed me to broaden the ways that I've gotten involved.
That's awesome. I know that I'm not a panelist, but I'll throw out there, I had a high school civics teacher too, who was very inspiring. So, shout out to all the New Hampshire civics educators who may be tuning in. I'm going to ask Jonathan, same question.
Definitely Xandra Rice Hawkins. I was introduced to Xandra in 2018, and she's probably been like the most like influential person in my life. Xandra, for anyone that doesn't know Xandra Rice Hawkins, she's the executive director for Granite State Progress and a Concord City Councilor. Overall, amazing human being. Also, I'll just give a shout out to Renell. Obviously, Renell has been a great mentor and friend as well.
Ronell, that's an awesome segue. So I'm going to round it out with you. Talk to us about mentorship.
Yeah, so I think for me, it's definitely been people my age. When I look for people who I feel like have pushed me to be in this position, we all kind of lean on each other. So my fellow organizers, people like Jordan Thompson and people like Jonathan Weinberg as well, we all kind of work together and really encourage each other and inspire each other to do this work. So it's definitely very youth-led when it comes to who has inspired me.
That's really cool to hear. The idea is as I'm moderating this, I'm trying to think about different themes that might be coming out or things that we hear. And actually the message I'm getting so far is that it's really diverse and there are a lot of different routes and channels to become civically engaged as a young person. And the idea that it's not just youth-led, it's not just older mentors or specifically civics teachers, but it can be a combination of that at different times, at different places. It goes back to, what I like to think about with civics, citizens count, where it's the idea that all of us as citizens can be participating. There are different ways that we can inspire people to be contributing to this great experiment that is democracy. So sort of on that note, I kind of want to tap your guys' knowledge and experience. We've learned a little about where things started for you and start looking at your unique perspective in terms of solving these civic problems. So this is a really big question to start with, but I feel like you guys can obviously handle it. So we're looking at the education system, right? Because we're talking about youth people. What changes do you think are needed in our education systems and our society in order to form that quote unquote more perfect union? This time I'll start with Jonathan.
Wow, I feel like I'm campaigning again. This was definitely one of the big questions. Is like when I was running for school board, what are you going to do to the education system? And I think it's just modernize the curriculum. I know people like have said that a lot about like what does that mean or like diversify curriculum, but I think just we have like a certain single set where we get it from Europe or very predominantly white thinkers. And I think what's really important is just kind of broadening that scope. Because the more people you learn about, whether it's like more Eastern history or also learning from predominantly people of color and different authors, I think you can learn a lot more than from what we're hearing now. And I think that can be an important shift in just thinking.
Talking muted, classic Zoom fail. So Cassandra, I'm gonna turn it over to you. What are you thinking about when we're looking at that more perfect union, kind of with an educational angle?
Yeah, so I think that we should definitely teach civics in all schools because I know that as for me, I never got to learn civics in high school. My English teacher actually taught me my class about the different parties. He just gave us a handout and said these are the two political parties, these are what they stand for, these are their beliefs, and you can choose which one fits for you. And there's even more parties than that, that if they don't fit with you, that you can go and look to see which one fits for you. And so I think that it should not be like a requirement, but I think that they should offer it, especially for people like me. I have a learning disability, so I have to have certain classes based on my disability and in high school. And so I think that they should teach it to everybody, not just those that are in honors classes or in private schools, but everywhere. So that way all kids are getting the tools that they need in order to make the changes that they want to make.
Awesome. So Ronell, I'm going to ask you next, more perfect union, thinking maybe with kind of an educational angle, but society as well.
Yeah, so I think we need, when it comes to education, we need to be very honest about our roots and where everything kind of started. When it comes to slavery, segregation, all of those things, we're still feeling the repercussions of those things today. And unfortunately, that has bled into all of our institutions, and that is why we see so many Black people in living in poverty, and we see heavy policing in Black neighborhoods. That's why all of these issues are occurring now. And I think we fail to talk about that as honestly as possible. And unfortunately, that is why ignorance is bred through our education system here in the United States. And so I think that that's super important. Unfortunately, there is a bill right now going through our state legislature to do the exact opposite of that. So hopefully that does not go farther than it already has, because it would completely backtrack and just undo all of the progress that we have already made.
All right, Jack, I'm going to throw it to you, round it out. Thinking about education and making a more perfect union.
I think just modernizing the entire system of how we do school in this country would be a really great step, because so much of the way that our public school system works right now is just so old fashioned, and it's meant to just kind of churn out these cookie cutter people who just, you go through school and bam, you're on your own in life. You have to choose a path from there. But if schools were able to give kids more diverse opportunities, to explore different career paths, different interests that aren't necessarily like common core type things that we are taught now in high school, I think would go a long way to giving people better opportunities in life and educating them in different topics, and which I think would go a long way to making more well-rounded people. And with the civics aspect, I think it's important to start civics education earlier. Like I personally wasn't exposed to any form of civics education until my senior year of high school. And at that point, that's very late in high school, obviously. And at that point, most kids are burnt out. It's a tough time to introduce a new topic. So if you found ways to introduce things like civics into our curriculum at an earlier age, I think it'll catch more people's attention, and it'll have that interest last longer than just the one semester or 1 year that they're exposed to it.
So this is kind of a related question, but I found myself thinking about it when you guys were talking about the different ways that we could change what we're teaching, how we're teaching, when we're teaching it. Because one thing that I know I reflect on when I think about civic learning is you have, in a way, two categories. You have that historical learning, where it's what does our Constitution say? How was it written? What are some notable Supreme Court cases? And what is the exact structure? What are the three branches of government? And then you have another piece, which is sort of the action aspect, which is what does it mean to be a responsible citizen, whether it's voting or protesting or contributing your community, volunteering in your community can technically be part of that. So I sort of a related question when we're looking about civics in our schools and our education and changes we might make. Do you think that you received both of that learning in school, or do you think that you received one piece and not another? Like, sort of, where did that come from for you? And so I'm going to start with Cassandra this time. Looks like Cassandra's frozen, so I'm going to jump in and go ahead and jump back to Ronell.
I was hoping somebody else could go first because I'm not really sure what my answer would be. So how about Jonathan?
Absolutely, go for it, Jonathan.
I think, yeah, definitely civics for me in school was not too informative. I think the way I learned more was like experientially, like getting involved in the state house, like learning the ins and outs, picking Dan's brain about how to find the press lists and how to actually the behind the scenes work on all the bills. I think definitely that was the way I learned a lot more than in school. And I think actually going back to how like to improve everything, I just think experiential learning, big fan of it.
Awesome. So I'll throw it out to you next, Jack. We're looking at that sort of, historical functional knowledge of how exactly things work versus that how do you take action? You know, where did you get that learning? Did you get that in school or did you get it elsewhere?
Yeah, so for me, the only reason that I received any knowledge in civics beyond just, the three branches and this is how the Supreme Court works and what is Congress, that kind of basic knowledge is because I took Dave Alcox's We the People program. If I hadn't done that, then my civics education would have been 100% exactly what you described, is that like very, very basic, just the extreme minimum information. And yeah, again, that kind of information that I learned in We the People isn't available to everybody because it's a class that a lot of people are put off to not take because it does require a lot of work and a lot of prerequisite requirements. So yeah, if I hadn't had that opportunity, my information would have been extremely limited all throughout high school.
Interesting. All right. Cassandra, Rep. Levesque, I'm curious. Obviously, you've had some real life experiential learning in the state legislature, but when you were in school, was there experiential in addition to sort of that knowledge base? How did your civic learning go in school?
Yeah, so mine was pretty basic of just here's our Constitution, here is the different branches of government, and then through Girl Scouts, I learned about the way ins and outs of things, and I'm still learning about the ins and outs of things, so it's a constant learning of from how a bill becomes a law to, hey, this is how you get in contact with your local senator, another state rep, and make sure that you actually do get in contact with them. And it's really, really hard to get down for the first everything. You're just thrown into it, and it's just like, okay, I'm just gonna go right in and just do it. But it's a lot of fun once you get in, and a lot of reps say like once you're in, it's hard to like get out of that political mindset, and it really is.
All right, Ronell, any final thoughts you want to add in?
Yes. So I think the foundation for it definitely did come from like my civics class and my AP Gov class in high school. And then obviously studying political science has kind of helped strengthen that. But a lot of it is definitely like the hands-on kind of stuff, like the organizing, working with politicians, doing really just really hands-on thing, the grassroots, I can't talk today, the grassroots work, all of that has really all of it together has formed basically my knowledge on all of this, which I think a lot of people don't have because at some schools they don't require it. Like Cassandra's saying that at her school they did not, and then at others they have like my civics class was only a semester, so it wasn't like for a full year, and you get like minimal knowledge from that. So yeah, definitely the foundation came from school, but then a lot of it came from studying political science, and the hands-on work has kind of blended it all together. So
yeah, so that was definitely a consistent theme that came through with all you guys, where you maybe got that, what are the branches of government and what are some notable Supreme Court cases in school, but you didn't necessarily learn as much about how to get involved until you were in action. You were doing it in the real world, whether that was the youth-led movements or mentors in the community or what it might be. So once again, sort of tapping your opinion on where we're going, I'm going to ask another really big question, which is, how do you guys think we can work together across differences to put things in action and solve some of these urgent problems when we're talking about, bridging divides? So yeah, like I said, another big question. I'm going to go ahead and start with Jack.
It's a tough one. I think a lot of people my age that I know who aren't necessarily involved in politics are very turned off by how divisive it is and confrontational. And so I think a good place to start would be maybe trying to find ways to have it become more civil again. I know it's easier said than done, obviously, but I think that would go a long way to getting more people involved and not having so many people turned off to politics. And I think after that kind of process begins, a lot more people will be able to, come involved, and a lot of the issues that we face in the society they would be easier to solve if everyone just kind of simmers down and finds a way to work together.
All right, I'm gonna throw it out next to Cassandra. You have to work across these divides. We're probably doing it this past week in the legislature. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, definitely. One of the biggest things that we definitely need to do is we're so focused on our political party and versus the actual issues that we are addressing. So it's not just, oh, we want to change this day to be the Granny D Day. It's that a Democrat put it in, or a Republican put it in, or a libertarian put it in. It's not about the issues anymore. It's about the parties. And I think that we need to step away from the parties. And one of the things that I always do is, especially in the New Hampshire House, we have our chamber, and then behind it is like an ante room. I say, like, whenever I'm in the chamber, I can disagree with their opinions, but outside that chamber, I will gladly shake their hand. I will eat lunch with them. And I don't care what political party you are, you're a person outside of those chambers. And I can tell if someone's having a rough day, so I'll go over them and say, hey, it's a rough day, let's just get through this, and then we'll be going home, and so we never have to see each other for the next couple weeks. So I think that's the biggest problem. And especially for youth, they're so turned away from being a state representative and getting into that side of politics, because all they see is representatives yelling and screaming at each other over what day of the week they should wear the color purple, or something trivial. And it's really, really hard for youth to get involved when they see other adults that should not be yelling and screaming at each other over small things. But once we get past political parties, I think that we can definitely all come together and agree that, hey, we should definitely educate our kids on civics and how to use those tools. And hey, maybe we should change that day to Granny D Day and other things.
All right, so reflecting on the influence of party as well, that definitely comes up. Brunel, obviously Black Lives Matter Manchester. I mean, talk about an issue over the past year. You guys have definitely, I'm sure, faced all sorts of, barriers, sometimes physical barriers to work across. And so I'm very curious to get your input here.
Yeah, so I feel like I have a slightly different view. I do agree that we need to extend a little bit more humanity. However, I think that, and by no means do I think that party politics or electoral politics are going to be our saving grace. But I think when it comes down to it, when it comes down to these issues, there are lives on the line. Like, these are people's lives that we're dealing with. And so I understand some hostility. I understand people being angry and being very passionate about these issues, because for me, like, when it comes to racial justice, these are issues that people were fighting way before I was even born. For hundreds of years, people have been fighting this very same fight. And so I feel like for somebody like me, I'm going to keep fighting in the way that I have fought for these issues. And so I can understand people feeling as if we need to be a little bit more civil, but I think we also need to understand that there are lives on the line. And it's really hard for people to have to argue for their humanity when it comes to politics. However, I think when it comes to young people, I don't know that young people are necessarily turned off. I think that it's more so that young people are doing other things. And that's one of the things that they teach you in political science, is not even that, like young people really don't are turned off, but they just don't care. And so I think to get more young people involved, we need to really push this sense of urgency, because like I keep saying, there are lives on the line. Like, these are issues that need to be thought about and talked about and dealt with right now. And so, yeah, that's my take on it.
Awesome. Jonathan, I'm going to ask you to close out your thoughts on bridging those divides and differences.
I think that's why I like organizing so much, is because you get to talk to people. I think back to 2018 with the March for Our Lives. There was at one rally someone there protesting, and when you're a single protester in a rally against like thousands of others, I can respect that, even if I disagree, because it's a scary thing to do, to be there when a lot of people are disagreeing. And of course, one of the protesters, a younger person, decided to take this person's hat, and this person was carrying, they were armed, so wasn't always the best move. But afterwards, I spoke to this person and we had a conversation, and I thought it was awesome, because on the outside, I thought they were a lot different, and obviously they had their preconceived notions of me. But we kind of talked, we got to know each other. It turned out his son was in my Spanish class, and we had something to relate over. And over that, we kind of formed a relationship that we kind of could cultivate. But I also think about phone banking. And when I call young people, they're a lot nicer than when I call older people. So I think it's about if people are receptive and ready. But also I agree with Brunel in that it's about people wanting to actually take it seriously and recognize the importance of many of these critical issues.
So hearing those answers, it had to make me think, especially in the context of this past year and the fact that we are on Zoom, a lot of what you all brought up I think translates differently online and through technology or through social media. Is it harder or easier to have those conversations with people across difference to forge more bonds? And so I don't know if I'll just throw it out to any four of you if you want to unmute. I don't know if you had any thoughts about how you might sort of frame your answer differently or think about it differently through the lens of technology.
The past year has definitely made it easier to reach more people and to have conversations with as many people as possible, but it's definitely harder to build personal connections through a computer screen. So it's definitely not the same. I think, we miss being able to organize in person and seeing everybody and really getting to know people. You just don't have that over Zoom. And so it's made it a lot easier to organize with as many people as possible and have meetings like this and things like that. But it's also really difficult when it comes to that in-person connection that I think is really important when it comes to organizing.
Thanks for that thought. I mean, it's something that I think about too with Citizens Count. We're primarily a website, and it's just, yeah, technology is a beautiful thing and it's a beautiful tool, but it also has its challenges. So I think that going forward, as we're looking to the future where democracy is going, it's something that we're going to need to be thinking about. And that's kind of how I wanted to close tonight, sort of our last few questions here. I wanted to be thinking about how your generation can lead us forward into the future. And so I guess the first thing I'm going to ask about that is, how is your generation different? How is it going to be different? Whether we're talking about the literal tools we're using in terms of technology or Zoom, or if we're talking about the different way your generation may think or approach problems. And I'll go ahead and start with Cassandra.
Yeah, definitely. So my generation, I know that I grew up with parents from different generations who have seen so many different things and never got the chance to make that change. They never thought they could make that change. And so my parents made sure that I knew that I could make a change no matter what age I was. And so they really encouraged me. And so I grew up knowing that I can make that change. I can be that change. And I think that my generation can use social media to spread their voices wider. And I mean, if you just wanted to have a petition or do a march, it's so much easier now than just word of mouth. And you can get a lot more people involved. You can even just raise funds to make a change in your own community now. And it's so great that we have the tools possible. And my parents always said, like, social media is really, really hard for the older generation to understand, and it is. And I understand that. I mean, in the legislature, we have a lot of older generations who don't know how to use Zoom, or don't know how to use barely know how to use Facebook, don't know how to use Twitter. That are being needed to be heard, and just show everybody that they can get their voices heard without having to scream across the room. They can just say, hey, this is my opinion, and it gets shared.
Awesome. So definitely reflecting on that technology and social media aspect again. I'm going to throw it out to you next, Jonathan. How is your generation different? How is it going to be different as you continue to lead us?
So I guess I'm going to say something that's kind of a little opposing to that. I guess I think social media is kind of a double-edged sword. I think we've seen a lot how people kind of get detached from others, and kind of it becomes like a screen to a screen versus a person to a person. And I think it's kind of scary because, in other words, some people, and at least a lot of people our age, can get more involved. But I think we've also seen a lot of performative activism from that. And are people going to translate that to actual work? And I think that is one of the things that I really think about is, will this generation be any different? Will people make that extra step after posting about Black Lives Matter march, about posting about an environmental initiative? Will people go one step forward to be like, no, I want to email my sender. Maybe even I want to run for office. Maybe I want to work for this nonprofit. And I think that is what is really important, is about taking that one extra leap.
Awesome. All right. Ronell, what are your thoughts? How's your generation different?
I think I would echo everything that was just said. Young people, there's one thing about us, it's that we're going to make some noise and we're going to have our voices heard. When I think back to the Black Lives Matter protests of last summer, they would not have gotten as much coverage as they did if not for young people. It wouldn't have spanned over the whole summer, literal months, like if we weren't the ones speaking up and having our voices heard. And so I think that's one of the tools that we have, is being able to get and keep things trending. Obviously, like, social media hasn't been a thing for that many years, and so other generations didn't have that tool. But now that we do, I think we can use it to our benefit. But like Jonathan said, it is a double-edged sword. So, sometimes you have to wonder, like, is this going to be something that can expand beyond just a hashtag? Are we going to actually do the work and not just post about what we say we believe in and what we say we're passionate about, but are we going to actually do the work after the fact? So, yeah.
All right, Jack, I'm going to have you round it out. And I'm especially curious because you were running a campaign in 2020, and I bet that, you were a very young campaign manager. So I'm wondering, did you see differences with your peers?
Yeah, no. So for me back in the fall, social media was a very great tool, especially during a pandemic when we had to decrease the amount of canvassing that we'd normally do. And we didn't hold any in-person events beyond a certain capacity because of the restrictions that were in place. So social media was a really great tool for us. But it definitely does not replace in-person interaction. It's a great tool, and I think it's allowed a lot of young people to have a lot of exposure to a lot of different issues that they probably wouldn't have had exposure to if it hadn't been for the internet and social media. But I find that for as great of a tool as it is, it does need to be coupled with in-person, face-to-face interaction and experiences in order to really to get things to the level that they need to be at in order for action to have. Totally lost my train of thought there, but yeah, no, I think, yeah, it's a great tool is basically what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and so sort of following on that, did you find that you were using that at all differently because you were a younger person? It's sort of like that generational difference, or do you think that's, most people have picked up on that? I'm just curious.
I think by now most people have definitely caught on to it. It might be different for candidates, like if, for example, in New Hampshire with our state legislature, a lot of those candidates tend to run their own campaigns because there's really not that much money in it. It's hard to have like a staff. There's no real need for a staff. So, a lot of the older people wouldn't really know how to use that tool. But for me, the experience that I've had is like people know what they're doing. And I think that I was able to do a good job with it. But even if I wasn't at the age that I am, I think my campaign would have done well with the social media aspect without me.
All right. So we're nearing the end here. And so I want to ask sort of this overarching question, and I'm going to ask each of you, I'm looking for what right now gives you the most hope when you're coming from your generation and you're looking forward. What are you most hopeful about? And then also, what are you most concerned about from where you're sitting as Gen Z looking forward? And I'm going to go ahead and throw this out to Ronelle first.
Hopeful. I was asked this question like last week too, and I could not pinpoint anything simply because being an activist is hard. And a lot of the times you do feel hopeless. Like it's hard. You feel like all of the work that you've done is just going to amount to nothing. And what worries me, so going on to the next part of the question, is that sometimes I feel as though, we elect people to do the job in the state house and in our cities and obviously at the national level, and nothing comes of it. And so, so it's honestly, I'll have to see. Yeah, it's definitely a fight that I'm going to keep fighting. But right now, I think it's a little too early in the game for me to say that I'm hopeful quite yet. I'll have to see some substantive change for me to be hopeful. So that's just an honest answer.
Hey, got it. Let's be real. We're coming out of 2020. It was a pretty bleak year, no matter where you're coming from. It's hard to keep fighting the good fight in a hard year like that. I'm going to turn next to Rep. Levesque. What do you see that you're most hopeful about, and where's that big concern?
Yeah, so what I am most hopeful about is seeing so many young people getting involved, whether that is phone banking or whether that's working on a campaign or even working on your own campaign. So I got started when I was very, very young, and at 18, I was approached by a representative saying, "Would you like to run?" And I was just like, "No, it's not." I never really saw myself. I was just pursuing art. And then at 19 years old, I was pursued again by her and the local town, like the local political party Dem chair. And I was approached by many people who were just like, "You need to get involved. You should be in politics." And I got involved, and I see so many more young people getting involved and becoming a state rep. And what gives me a lot of concern is the factor that even though we have a lot of young people in our legislature, we still have older generation of legislators who say, "Oh, I'm just going to stay here, take the seat, and just have my agenda," versus making any change. And even though there's a lot of them that do want to make a change, there is that few who just are doing that one agenda, whether that's their party or whether that's a organization that they're with, and just not making that change that's needed or and that really concerns me from my standpoint, where it's just like we need people to be the voice for all, not just the few.
All right. Next up, Jack, let me know. Biggest hope, biggest concern.
Something that I saw that was really encouraging to me was the number of young people who voted recently in 2020. I think that was such a cool thing to see, because it was I think the greatest percentage of the like 18 to 24 range that had ever voted in the history of a U.S. election, which I think was really, really encouraging for the future. Because if you get into the habit of voting at a young age, studies show that sticks with you for the rest of your life. I think it's a really cool thing to see. And something that overall I'm very hopeful for the future, but I think that, we need to regain the ability to have conversations civilly. And, it's okay to disagree on issues, and there are issues that need to be disagreed on, but I think the political atmosphere in this country needs to simmer down a little bit in order for us to really make real progress.
All right, thanks. And I have to bounce off that just about the voter turnout, because one thing that I've looked at in my work is different measures of partisanship, and you can measure that, and pretty much no matter how you measure it, it's been going up, 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 up. And that's very concerning for various reasons. But it also shows that you do tend to have higher voter turnout in those years. You do tend to have people more engaged. And so I think that there is the thing, when I'm looking at Ronelle and she's saying, I'm not very hopeful right now, there's a lot of bad stuff going on. At the same time, if that can motivate people to get involved, especially young people, then that can be a good thing too. All right. And I'm going to end it up with you, Jonathan. Take us home. What is that hope, and what's the concern?
I know this is a young leaders panel, but what gives me hope is when I have conversations with older people who are willing to learn and listen. I think that's what gives me hope, because while it's important to make room for the next generation, there's still a lot of people who are in positions of power that are not in the next generation. And the more you engage with older individuals, I guess I'm using old loosely, I guess that can be 40 and up, 30 and up. The more you're able to actually have a fellow member on the school board and me, I guess you would never expect us to have similar ideas. They were very gung-ho about the SRO position, and they actually switched sides and did not believe the SRO should be a position anymore. And I think that really was amazing for me to see, because it showed an ability to learn, listen, and embrace something different. And I guess what concerns me is back to social media and just echo chambers. And I think I think that's a very scary prospect for the future.
Definitely have to agree with you there. It's sort of, that's always the double-edged sword with technology, it seems. There's always so much beautiful power, and then always such terrifying possibilities of how it could go wrong. I really want to thank all of you so much for taking the time to share your thoughts with us, reflecting on what we've listened to. I'm obviously really moved by your guys' passion. And I think that really it was interesting to hear how sometimes it's people your own age inspiring you. Sometimes it's older people, it's elected officials, it's community leaders, it's people in your family. I think that the idea is, even though this is a panel about young people and focused on young people, we saw that it's really our whole community that comes together when it comes to civic engagement and that civic responsibility that we all have to make a more perfect union, as I was quoting earlier in a question. I do want to throw it out briefly. If anybody has any other questions they want to throw in the chat, I wanted to live that opportunity, but otherwise I just want to thank you all and give you a little round of applause. Feel free to throw applause in the chat or the snaps or however you do it on Zoom these days. Dan, do you have any other final thoughts or words for us?
Just thank you so much to our panel. Question about hope. Young people getting involved in our democracy and raising your voice and being active and engaged, that gives me hope. And so this is a great panel. Thank you for being here. Anna, thank you for moderating on behalf of the New Hampshire Institute for Civics Education. We're grateful for you being here and for our panel and for everybody joining in. So thank you very much, and have a good rest of the night.